footprints weren't there when I set up camp. I know that for a fact because I swept the ground with my headlamp before staking the tent, old habit from my trail guide days. By morning, they circled the entire perimeter. Deep. Deliberate. Each one roughly 16 inches long. I told myself it was a bear. I want to be clear about something. I've done over 40 solo trips through the Cascades. I know what elk sign looks like. I know what cougar scat smells like. I know the difference between a branch falling and a branch being moved. I'm telling you this not to brag, but because I need you to understand, I wasn't scared easily. And whatever made those prints wasn't any animal I've spent 15 years learning to identify. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was on day 4 of a 9-day solo loop through the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest, about 7 miles east of the Napequa Valley Trail Junction, when I first noticed I wasn't alone. I'd been hearing something since the second night. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of sound. If you've spent real time in backcountry, you know what I mean. The forest has a baseline: insects, wind through fir needles, the occasional small animal in the underbrush. When something large is nearby, that baseline drops out. The birds stop. The squirrels freeze. The whole forest holds its breath. That silence had been following me since mile 19. At first, I clocked it as coincidence. A deer moving through. A predator further upslope that the animal sensed before I did. On the third day, I stopped on a ridgeline to eat lunch and watched the tree line below me for almost 20 minutes. Nothing emerged. Nothing moved. But the silence stayed, pressed against the tree line like something big was standing just inside it, patient in a way that animals aren't. When I got back to camp that third evening, I found a pile of stones near the creek I was camped beside. 7 of them, stacked. The top one was flat and pale, and on it, I can still see this clearly, there were 2 parallel grooves scratched into the surface. Like fingers. Like something had dragged 2 fingers across the rock and left them there. I almost took a photo. I don't know why I didn't. I think part of me didn't want to acknowledge it was real. I kicked the stack over and started boiling water for dinner, and I didn't sleep that night at all. On the morning of day 5, I found the deer. Or what was left of it. A doe, maybe 90 pounds, positioned at the edge of my camp with a precision that made my stomach turn. Not eaten. Not mauled. Placed. On its side, legs folded neatly beneath it, head oriented toward my tent. The carcass was still warm. The neck was broken, a single clean break, no claw marks, no teeth marks. Just snapped. It takes a significant amount of force to snap a deer's neck cleanly. I used to know the exact figure from a wilderness first aid manual. I couldn't remember it standing there in the early fog, but I remembered it was more force than most people could generate with their hands. I broke camp in under 12 minutes. That's not a record for me, but it's close. I didn't run. Running triggers pursuit responses in predators, and whatever this was, I didn't want to trigger anything. I walked fast. I stayed on the trail. I kept my bear spray unclipped on my chest strap and I didn't look behind me. I could hear it though. Not footsteps. Something subtler. The way the forest silence moved with me, kept pace with me, stayed roughly 40 to 60 yards off my left shoulder for the next 3 hours. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was in shock from the deer. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. Then, just before noon, something threw a rock. Not at me. Ahead of me. It landed in the trail maybe 15 feet in front of where I was walking. A rock roughly the size of a grapefruit, thrown from the tree line to my left. It didn't roll. It landed hard and stayed. Like a warning. Like something marking where I should stop. I stopped. And from somewhere in those trees, deep, resonant, like nothing I've heard from any animal, something exhaled. I've tried to describe that sound to people since I got back. The closest I can get is, imagine a human sigh, but from a chest cavity the size of a refrigerator. Low. Controlled. Not threatening exactly, but enormous. The sound of something that was not afraid of me and had no reason to be. I didn't move for a long time. Then I said out loud, to no one, to the trees, "I'm going to keep walking now." And I did. The silence followed me for another 2 miles. Then, at a creek crossing near the junction of the Napiqua Cutoff Trail, it stopped. The forest sound came back all at once: birds, insects, wind, like someone had lifted a glass off the world. I stood in the middle of that creek and just breathed. I made it to the trailhead on day 6. I'd cut the trip 3 days short, and I haven't told many people why. Here's the part one haven't posted anywhere yet. When I got back to my truck, I did what you'd expect: checked myself for ticks, changed my socks, ate an entire sleeve of crackers from the glove box. I was normal. I was fine. I was out. Then I pulled out my phone to check the time. I'd been keeping it on airplane mode to save battery, standard backcountry practice. When I turned airplane mode off, the GPS timestamp synced and I had a notification from the trail cam I'd set up at camp on night 1, pointed at the creek, connected to a satellite relay device. It had detected motion 47 times. The camera was a Browning Strike Force Pro, set to a 10-second burst. I have a subscription to the cloud storage service. I pulled up the clips there in the parking lot, one by one. The first 36 clips were deer. The next 4 were nothing, motion from a branch, probably. Clip 41 was a bear, a black bear, moving through quickly at around 2 a.m. on night 3. Clips 42 through 47 were between 3:47 a.m. and 4:12 a.m. on night 4. In clip 42, at the very edge of the camera's infrared range, there is a shape. Bipedal. Tall enough that the top of the frame cuts off its head. It is standing at the creek still, facing the camp. It does not move for 6 minutes. In clip 47, the last clip, it turns. And then it walks into the dark, upright, and it is gone. I've watched those 6 clips probably 200 times. I've shown them to one person, my brother, who doesn't believe in this kind of thing and still went quiet when he watched them. I've compared the pixel height against known objects in the frame, the camp chair I'd left out, the bare canister. Whatever is standing at that creek is between 7 and 8.5 feet tall. I filed a trip report with the Okanogan-Wenatchee Ranger District on October 14th. Case reference NFWA 2024-11089. The ranger I spoke to on the phone listened to everything I said without interrupting. At the end, he paused for a long time and said, "You're not the first person to report something in that valley this season." Then he asked me not to share my exact GPS coordinates publicly. I haven't. I won't. I still have the clips. I'm not posting them, not yet, maybe not ever. Not because I think people won't believe me. Because of something a wildlife biologist told me after I described the footage, that in every documented cultural encounter record, across every indigenous tradition in the Pacific Northwest, one thing is consistent. They remember who sees them. Last week, I drove past the trailhead. I wasn't going in. I just wanted to see it, I guess. To make it feel ordinary again. There was a truck parked at the trailhead kiosk. I almost didn't look twice. But something made me slow down as I passed. Sitting on the hood of that truck was a flat, pale rock, with 2 parallel grooves scratched into the surface. It wasn't there when I drove in. I passed that kiosk 20 minutes earlier on my way to get coffee at the gas station down the road. I don't know whose truck that was. I've never seen it before in my life. I got back on the highway and I drove home and I didn't stop once. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do with it. I don't want to go back. But I keep thinking about what that ranger said. You're not the first person to report something in that valley this season. I've been wondering about the others. Whether they got out. Whether they're still wondering, like me, what exactly it was that decided to let them leave. Has anyone else hiked the Napiqua Valley area and had something follow them out? I keep checking the trail reports. I keep looking for case number NFWA 2024-11089. I haven't found anything. I don't know if that means I'm wrong, or if it means something else entirely. The first witness I interviewed was a 54-year-old transit worker named Dennis Caulfield. He described it calmly, the way people describe things they've already made peace with: the wide wings, the red eyes, the way it stood on the roof of the merchandise mart and watched the river below. He said it didn't fly away. He said it just stopped being there, like a TV turning off. I wrote it up as a human interest piece. Ran it in the Metro section on page 12. I thought that was the end of it. That was 4 months ago. I have since collected 114 witness accounts. I have a wall in my apartment covered in pushpins and red thread. I have stopped sleeping through the night. And 3 days ago, a civil engineer I'd been consulting with, a man with 30 years' experience in infrastructure assessment, looked at the pattern I'd mapped and went very, very quiet. He said, "Do you know what all these locations have in common?" I do now. I wish I didn't. My name is Carla Voss. I cover the urban affairs beat for a Tribune affiliate. I'm not going to be more specific than that, for reasons that will become clear. I've been a journalist for 11 years. I've covered gang violence, city council corruption, 2 fatal building collapses, and the opioid crisis in Pilsen. I don't sensationalize. I don't embellish. When I tell you what I've found, I need you to read it as a journalist's account, not a ghost story. The sighting started in late January. A woman named Priya Mehta reported seeing a large winged figure perched on a light pole on the river walk near Wacker Drive at 11:40 p.m. She told her husband. Her husband told his co-worker. His co-worker had seen the same thing from the window of a 22nd floor apartment on Michigan Avenue 2 nights earlier. I got tipped to the story through a Reddit thread, /ChicagoAfterDark_real, posted January 31st, now deleted, where a night shift security guard described watching something with a wingspan he estimated at 12 to 14 feet land on the upper deck of Lower Wacker Drive and crouch there for almost 4 minutes before dropping silently into the darkness below. I archived that thread before it was deleted. I have the screenshots. I went to talk to that security guard. He answered his door, looked at my press badge, and before I said a single word, he said, "You're here about the thing on Lower Wacker. I've been doing this job for 11 years. That's never happened to me before." His name was Marcus Webb, 38, working a private security contract at a parking structure on Franklin Street. He'd worked nights for 6 years and described himself as a person who did not rattle easily. He rattled when he talked about this. He said he first saw it on January 27th at approximately 2 a.m. He was doing a perimeter walk when he heard a sound from above, not a wing beat. He was specific about this, not like a bird, more like a heavy canvas sheet being snapped taut. A thwump. He looked up and it was just there, already still, crouched on the upper level of the parking deck opposite him. He said the eyes were what got him. Red, yes, but not glowing in the way people imagine glowing eyes, not neon, not cartoonish. More like the red of a photo flash in an animal's eye at night. Reflective. Catching light that wasn't there. He said it looked at him for a long time. Then it turned its head, slowly, deliberately, the way an owl moves its head, and looked north. Toward the river. Toward the merchandise mart. Then it dropped off the edge and was gone. Marcus Webb filed an incident report with his company. Report number PSG 2024-0127MW. His supervisor told him not to discuss it. 3 weeks later, Marcus was reassigned to a day's shift he hadn't requested. He thinks he knows why. I think I do too. By February, I had 11 accounts. By March, 43. By April, over 80. I want to be careful here about what I'm claiming. I am not claiming these witnesses all saw the same thing. I am not claiming anything supernatural. What I am saying is that the geographic and temporal clustering of these reports is statistically anomalous in a way that I cannot explain with the tools available to me as a journalist. So I made a map. Every confirmed sighting, meaning accounts where I'd spoken directly to the witness, verified their identity, and cross-referenced with at least one corroborating detail, got a red pin. Every probable sighting, credible second-hand accounts, got an orange pin. Every location where witnesses described the figure looking towards something, rather than just perching, got a blue thread connecting the sighting point to the direction of the gaze. It took me 2 weeks to notice what the blue threads had in common. Every single one of them pointed toward infrastructure. Bridges, water mains, elevated rail lines, highway overpasses. The blue threads were a web of vectors, and every vector terminated at a load-bearing structure somewhere in the city's transit or water or transportation grid. I sat with that for a long time before I called Dr. Raymond Okafor. Dr. Okafor has a PhD in structural engineering from Northwestern and spent 22 years with the city's Infrastructure Assessment Division before retiring in 2019. When I showed him my map, he didn't laugh. He put on his reading glasses and leaned in close, and the color left his face the way water leaves a bathtub, slowly, and then all at once. He spent 40 minutes with the map. He asked me for the dates attached to each sighting. He cross-referenced something on his laptop he wouldn't let me see. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a very long time. "Carla," he said, and he never calls me Carla, we've always been professional. "How much do you know about the Silver Bridge?" I knew enough. Everyone who's ever looked into Mothman knows about the Silver Bridge, the suspension bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia that collapsed on December 15, 1967, killing 46 people. For 13 months before the collapse, residents of Point Pleasant reported sightings of a large winged figure with red eyes. The sightings stopped the night the bridge went down. The NTSB report on the Silver Bridge failure identified a stress fracture in a single eye-bar link in the suspension chain, Dr. Okafor said. A fracture that had been developing undetected for years. The bridge was inspected. Nothing was found. The fracture was in a location that standard inspection protocols would have missed. He pulled up a document on his laptop and finally turned it toward me. These are the results from the city's last infrastructure audit. October 2023. There are 6 structures flagged with maintenance concerns ranging from moderate to significant. He pointed at his screen. Now look at your map. 4 of the 6 flagged structures had direct sighting clusters around them. The Clark Street Bridge, the Kinsey Street Railroad Bridge, the Green Line elevated section between Lake and Clinton stations, and the water intake crib at 68th Street in Lake Michigan, which I hadn't even known existed until Dr. Okafor showed it to me, a century-old concrete structure sitting 2 miles offshore, part of the city's drinking water system, last fully inspected in 2019. The water intake crib had the highest concentration of sightings of any single location. 11 separate witnesses, working on lake vessels or watching from the shore at night, had reported seeing a winged shape perched on the crib's upper superstructure. Perched and watching. Always watching the city. Dr. Okafor told me something before I left his office that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said that in the months before the Silver Bridge collapse, engineers who reviewed the bridge had noted increased vibration in the structure during traffic loading. They attributed it to seasonal thermal expansion. They were wrong. The vibration was the fracture propagating. He said the Kinsey Street Railroad Bridge has been reporting anomalous vibration data since December. The city's official position is that it's thermal expansion. I filed 4 FOIA requests in March related to infrastructure inspection data for the flag structures. 2 came back with heavily redacted documents. 1 came back denied on the grounds of security concerns, which is not a standard FOIA denial category, which means someone made a specific decision to invoke it. 1 has not come back at all, 63 days past the legally required response window. I've talked to a city infrastructure official, off the record, who told me that there are conversations happening at a level above her pay grade about one of the flag structures. She wouldn't tell me which one. She looked genuinely frightened when I pushed. The most recent sighting I have documented occurred 5 days ago. A woman named Teresa Koloski, a retired schoolteacher, 67 years old, not someone I would expect to fabricate anything, was walking her dog along the lakefront path near Montrose Harbor at approximately 4:20 a.m. She suffers from insomnia. She told me she saw it land on the harbor's stone breakwater and stand there, motionless, for several minutes. She said she wasn't afraid. She said that was the strangest part. She said, "It didn't feel evil. It felt like something that knew something and was waiting for the rest of us to catch up." Then she told me something no other witness had mentioned. She said there were 2 of them. I've been sitting on this story for 3 weeks because I don't know what it means. I'm a journalist. I report facts. The facts are: 114 people across Chicago have reported sighting a large winged humanoid entity between January and May 2025. The sightings cluster geographically around 6 infrastructure structures currently flagged by the city for maintenance concerns. A structural engineer with 30 years of experience believes the Kinsey Street Railroad Bridge may be experiencing active stress fracturing that is being misattributed to thermal expansion. My FOIA request for inspection records of that bridge was denied on security grounds. A city official told me off the record that high-level conversations are happening. And now there are 2 of them. I don't know what Mothman is. I don't know if it's a creature, a phenomenon, a mass hallucination, or something so far outside my frame of reference that I don't have language for it. What I know, what I've reported on for 11 years, is that when a pattern this clear exists, it usually means something. In Point Pleasant, the pattern lasted 13 months. Then the bridge fell. 46 people died on a Tuesday evening in December, in rush hour traffic, when the structure gave way beneath them. I was walking home from Dr. Okafor's office last Thursday evening. It was just past 9 p.m., still light enough to see clearly. I was on the Kinsey Street Bridge itself. I walk it sometimes now, watching for anything, old reporter's habit of going to the location. I stopped in the middle of the bridge and looked down at the river. The water was dark and slow. A water taxi passed beneath me heading east, its running lights reflecting in long yellow streaks. I heard the sound Marcus Webb described. The canvas snap. The thwump. I looked up. It was on the bridge tower. Maybe 60 feet above me. Crouched on the steel superstructure the way a bird crouches on a wire. Casual, balanced, absolutely still. I could see the eyes. Exactly as every witness had described them. Red, reflective, catching the city lights. It was looking at me. Not at the river. Not at the city. At me specifically, the way something looks at you when it has decided you are worth looking at. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. My phone was in my hand and I thought about taking a photo and I didn't, because that's not what the moment was. The moment was something else. Something I don't have a journalism word for. Then it opened its wings. The span of them, God, the span. Wider than the lane of traffic I was standing in. It didn't flap. It simply opened them, and the air pressure changed, and I felt it in my chest like a bass note, and then it lifted off the tower and banked south over the river, and it was gone into the dark between the city lights. I stood on that bridge for a long time after. The steel beneath my feet was vibrating. I told myself it was the traffic. I told myself it was thermal expansion. I told myself that because I needed to get home, and I needed to write this down, and I needed to believe that I had a little more time. I'm not sure I believe it. If you live in Chicago, if you commute across the Clark Street Bridge, if you take the Green Line, if you've seen anything over the lake at night that you couldn't explain, I need you to tell me. Not because I'm collecting ghost stories. Because I'm a journalist trying to understand a pattern before it ends the same way it ended in Point Pleasant in 1967. My DMs are open. I check them every morning. Please tell me I'm wrong about what I think is coming. Posted at 11:58 p.m. I have a meeting with my source at the DOT in 6 days. I'll update when I can. CV. The first time I saw Harold Beese, he was standing at the edge of our property line in the dark, watching our kitchen window. Not walking past. Not checking his mailbox. Standing. Still as a fence post, hands at his sides, face tilted slightly upward toward the light spilling out from where my wife Dana was washing dishes after dinner. I only saw him because I took the dog out before bed and my flashlight swept across the field between our houses and caught him there, maybe 60 yards out, in the scrubby brush between the fence lines. I waved. The way you wave at a neighbor even when your stomach is telling you not to. He didn't wave back. He just turned and walked toward his house, and I told myself it was nothing, and I brought the dog inside and locked the door and didn't say anything to Dana. I didn't want to scare her. That was in October. It is now June. I'm writing this from a motel room in Moab because we can't go back to the house yet, and my wife is asleep in the bed next to me, and our daughter hasn't spoken more than 20 words since the night we left. I need to write this down before I convince myself it didn't happen the way it happened. We moved to Duchesne County in September. My name is Paul Garrett, I'm 41, I'm a remote IT contractor, and my wife Dana is a pediatric occupational therapist who'd been burning out on Denver traffic and Denver costs and Denver everything for the better part of 3 years. Our daughter Maisie had just turned 9. We wanted land. We wanted quiet. We wanted to be the kind of family that had a garden and chickens and a porch where you could see stars. The property was listed as 4.2 acres, a 3-bedroom ranch house built in 1987, 11 miles outside of Duchesne proper on a county road that Google Maps still lists incorrectly as Sutter Creek Road. It's actually Settler Creek Road, a detail that matters because it took 3 days for our mail to start arriving correctly, and during those 3 days we noticed that someone had been opening our mailbox. Harold Beese owned the property to our north. About 200 yards of open scrubland separated our houses. He'd been there for, nobody could tell us exactly how long. The woman at the county assessor's office in Duchesne said she thought he'd owned the property since the late 80s. She said it quickly and moved on, and I noticed she didn't look at me when she said it. Harold came to introduce himself 3 days after we moved in. He was tall, 6'3", maybe 6'4", and lean in that desiccated way of men who've spent decades in dry heat. I put him at somewhere between 60 and 75, which is a wider range than I normally give a person, but his face was hard to read. His eyes were very pale, almost colorless. He brought us a jar of something he said was preserves, though the contents were too dark to be any fruit I recognized. He shook my hand and said, "You've got a daughter." Not a question. We hadn't mentioned Maisie. Her school stuff was still in boxes. I said, "Yes, we do, she's 9. He nodded slowly and looked at the house. Then he said, "Keep her inside after dark." He said it the way you say something obvious, like he was reminding us to sort our recycling. Then he walked back to his truck and drove up the road, and Dana and I stood on the porch looking at each other. We told ourselves he was just an eccentric old man. People say strange things. Rural people are different from city people. We'd wanted something different. We unpacked Maisie's room and didn't think about it. The dog started refusing to go north. This took about 2 weeks to register as a pattern. Biscuit is a 4-year-old yellow lab, the most food-motivated, people-pleasing animal I've ever owned. She'll walk into traffic if she thinks there's a tennis ball on the other side. But when I started taking her on morning walks up the county road toward Harold's property, she'd stop at a specific point. I eventually measured it at roughly 180 yards from our front door, plant her feet, and refused to move. Not growling. Not lunging. Just stopped. Weight back on her haunches. Ears flat. Trembling in a way I'd only ever seen her do during thunderstorms. The first few times I put it down to smell. Coyotes, maybe? The county road had coyotes scat on the shoulders. Then one morning in late October she stopped at her usual spot, and I looked up and Harold was standing in his driveway, 400 yards away, and he was watching us. I raised my hand. He raised his hand back. Normal enough. But Biscuit was making a sound I'd never heard her make. Low. Continuous. Not a growl, something underneath a growl. A sound that seemed to come from her chest rather than her throat. I turned her around and we went home. That afternoon I looked up the history of the land on the county recorder's website. Harold's parcel came up as owned by Harold R. Beese. Transfer date, 1987. Previous owner, listed as State of Utah, acquired through abandonment. Before that, the records just stopped. As if the property had never formally existed. I told myself land records in rural counties are often incomplete. I told myself I was looking for problems. That night, something walked around the outside of our house. Not a person. Not exactly. The footsteps were wrong, the spacing was wrong, the weight distribution was wrong, there were too many of them, or not enough. I couldn't count them properly, and I sat in bed listening with my hand on my phone for 45 minutes until they stopped. Dana slept through it. I didn't wake her. In the morning, I checked the ground outside. The soil near the north wall of the house was soft from irrigation. There were marks in it, but I couldn't identify them. Too large for a coyote. Wrong shape for a bear. Nothing I could name. I took a photo. It's still on my phone. I've shown it to 3 people and none of them could tell me what made it. Maisie saw him in December. She came downstairs one morning before school and said, "Dad, I saw Mr. Harold last night." I asked her what she meant. She said she'd gotten up for water around midnight and looked out her bedroom window. Her window faces north, toward his property, and Harold was standing in the field. She said he was very far away, but she could see him because it was a clear night and there was a full moon. I kept my voice steady. I asked her what he was doing. She thought about it. She said, "He was looking at our house. But then he got down." I asked her what she meant by got down. She looked uncomfortable. She said, "Like he crouched down. But then he kept going down. Like he kept going and then I couldn't see him anymore." Then she asked for cereal and I made it for her and I put her on the school bus and I came inside and sat at the kitchen table for a very long time. That afternoon I called the Duchesne County Sheriff's Department and asked about Harold Beese on Settler Creek Road. The dispatcher put me through to a deputy who gave his name as Reyes. I explained that our neighbor had been standing near our property at night and that my daughter had seen something that concerned me. Deputy Reyes asked the address. I gave it. There was a pause. He said, "Settler Creek Road? Out past the 17-mile marker?" I said yes. Another pause. Longer this time. He said, "Sir, how long have you been out there?" I said, "Since September." He said, "I'd like to send someone out to talk to you. Would tomorrow work?" The deputy who came the next day was not Deputy Reyes. A different man, younger, who took notes and nodded a lot and told me that Harold Beese was known to the department and that there had been previous complaints about unusual activity near his property and that they were aware of the situation. He would not tell me what that situation was. He suggested we consider a no-contact order if the behavior continued. As he was leaving, he stopped at his cruiser and turned back to me and said, "Does your daughter's bedroom window face north?" I said yes. He nodded like that was the answer he expected. He said, "Maybe move her to a south-facing room." He drove away before I could ask him why. We moved Maisie to the south bedroom and told her it was because of the morning light. February was quiet. I'd almost convinced myself we'd overreacted. Dana had never been as affected as I was. She thought I was going through some kind of anxiety response to the move, the isolation, the change in environment. She wasn't dismissive, but she was rational. She said Harold was probably just a weird old man. She said rural Utah was an adjustment. She said Maisie had probably half-dreamed what she saw. I wanted to believe her. I nearly did. Then in March, Harold came to the door. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock. Dana was picking up Maisie from school. I answered the door, and there he was, same lean frame, same colorless eyes, same unsettling sense that his age was somehow both very old and impossible to specify. He was holding something. A small bundle wrapped in brown paper. He said, "Found this at the fence line. Thought you'd want it back." I took it. It was Maisie's hair tie, a purple one with a small plastic butterfly charm. She'd lost it in the fall and had been upset about it for a week. I asked Harold how he knew it was hers. He said, "She wore it the day you moved in." I stood there holding my daughter's hair tie and I thought about how far away his property was from where Maisie might have dropped something at the fence line. I thought about how you'd have to cover a specific distance across scrubland to find something that small and know who it belonged to. I thought about the window that used to face north. I said, "Harold, I'd like you to stay off our property." He looked at me for a moment with those pale, pale eyes. He said, "I'm not the thing you should be worried about being on your property." Then he walked away. I watched him cross the scrubland toward his house, and I noticed, God help me, I noticed this clearly, that his shadow on the ground did not match the way he was walking. The shadow moved wrong. The proportions were wrong. I stood on my porch in the afternoon sun and watched a man's shadow move like something that wasn't a man. And I couldn't look away, and I couldn't go inside. And I don't know how long I stood there before I finally turned around. I called Dana immediately, and told her to come straight home. I didn't tell her why until Maisie was in bed. Then I told her everything, the footsteps at night, what Maisie had said in December, the deputy who told me to move her room, all of it. Dana is a rational person. She is trained in behavioral observation. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and listened to all of it without interrupting, and when I finished she was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "The preserves he brought us in September. I threw them out because the jar smelled wrong. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd think I was being rude." I asked her what wrong meant. She said, "Copper. It smelled like copper. Like blood." In April, Biscuit disappeared. She was in the backyard at 7 p.m. By 8 p.m. she was gone. The fence was intact. The gate was closed. There was no gap she could have gotten through. I searched until midnight. Dana drove the county roads. Nothing. We found her the next morning, 50 feet from the north fence line, sitting perfectly still in the scrubland, facing Harold's property. Not injured. Not distressed physically. But she wouldn't move on her own. I had to carry her inside, all 65 pounds of her, and when I picked her up she was trembling the way she trembles in thunderstorms, that deep chest tremble, and she didn't stop for most of the day. Her fur on the back of her neck was matted. I checked it carefully in the bathroom light. Something had been holding her there. The marks were spaced widely, the way large fingers might press into fur if something very big gripped the back of a dog's neck and simply held it in place. That night I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and I typed, "Skinwalker, Utah, Duchesne County," and I read for 3 hours. I want to be precise about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying I believe in the supernatural. I'm not saying that what the Navajo call Yinaldlushii is a literal entity that I was living next to on Settler Creek Road. I am saying that what I read, the descriptions, the characteristics, the specific behaviors documented in accounts going back decades, described Harold Beese with an accuracy that made me physically cold. The pale eyes. The wrongness of proportion. The knowledge of names and details he shouldn't have. The way animals react. The shadow. There was a post on a forum I found, archived, from 2009, username CK_UT_rancher, now deleted, that described a neighbor on a county road in Duchesne County who had been there longer than anyone remembers, and who left strange bundles at fence lines and whose shadow moved wrong in daylight. The poster said they'd moved within a year. They said they'd never gone back. The post was from 2009. I have no way of knowing if it was the same property. But the county road description matched ours. The last night we spent on the property was May 14th. I was up late working. Dana and Maisie were asleep. It was just past 1 a.m. The motion light on the north side of the house triggered. I have a camera feed on my laptop connected to the motion lights. I looked at it. Harold was at the fence line, standing exactly as he'd stood that first night in October, still, face tilted toward the house, hands at his sides. But there was something different about the way he was standing. Something about the angles of his joints. His knees appeared to bend slightly in the wrong direction, just slightly, just enough that when he shifted his weight the movement was wrong in a way I cannot fully articulate, but that every part of my body recognized as wrong. I watched the camera feed. I didn't move. He stood there for 11 minutes. I have the timestamp. Then he crouched down. Slowly. The way Maisie had described in December. He crouched, and he kept going down, folding in ways that a person shouldn't fold, getting lower and lower until he was on all fours in the scrubland and the camera could barely resolve him in the darkness at the edge of the motion light's range. And then he moved. Not walked. Moved. On all fours, low to the ground, fast in the way that is wrong for anything that size, fast in the way that makes your brain refuse to process what it's seeing because the speed and the size don't belong together. He moved north, away from our house, back toward his property. And he was gone. I woke Dana up. I told her we were leaving. Right now, tonight, we were leaving. She looked at my face and she didn't argue. I have been grateful for that every day since. We woke Maisie and told her it was an adventure. We packed 2 bags. We were in the car by 2 a.m. and we drove south through the dark and we didn't stop until Moab. We haven't been back. We have a property management company retrieving our things in daylight, in groups, with a clear instruction not to go near the north fence line and not to speak to anyone who comes to the property from that direction. I called Deputy Reyes, the original one, and left a message. He hasn't called back. I looked him up on the county sheriff's website. His name isn't there anymore. I called the general department line and asked for him by name. The woman who answered said she didn't have anyone by that name currently employed with the department. He called me from a county dispatch number in November. I have the call record on my phone. I can see the number. When I dial it now, it rings 12 times and goes to a voicemail that says the box is full. I don't know what to do with that. I told you Maisie hasn't spoken much since we left. That's mostly true. She talks, she answers questions, she functions. But she's quieter than she was. She doesn't look out windows at night. She hasn't asked about Biscuit going missing, which is strange for a 9-year-old who loved that dog intensely. She just hasn't brought it up, as if something in her has quietly filed it away in a place she's decided not to open. Last week she said something that I keep turning over and over. We were in the car, driving to her temporary school here in Moab, and out of nowhere she said, "Daddy, does Mr. Harold know where we are now?" I told her no. I told her we were very far away. She thought about this for a moment. Then she said, "He knew where I was before. Even when I wasn't outside." I didn't say anything. I kept driving. She looked out the window. She said, "He has a different face when he comes at night. I didn't want to tell you because I thought you'd be sad." I asked her what the other face looked like. She turned back to the window and I could see her reflection in the glass, and her expression was the expression of a child choosing carefully. She said, "Like an animal that learned what a face was supposed to look like and tried to make one." We drove the rest of the way to school in silence. I checked the locks every night. We're on the 2nd floor. The windows face south. I keep telling myself that's enough. I'm not sure I believe it. If you've lived in Duchesne County, or anywhere in rural Utah, and you've had a neighbor who knew things they shouldn't, who acted wrong in ways you couldn't explain, who your animals refused to go near, I need to know I'm not alone in this. Not because it'll make me feel better. Because I need to know how many people moved away and never talked about it. And I need to know if any of them still feel watched, even now, even this far from Settler Creek Road. Posted at 2:31 a.m. from a motel in Moab. I'm going to try to sleep. I'll update if I can. Paul.